What if the one person you're forbidden to love is the only one standing between you and certain death? 10 years ago, a ruthless business deal ended with a gunshot in the middle of a storm. One family lost everything. Another built an empire on the ruins and swore the two names would never cross again. Now, on a luxury cruise sailing straight into the storm of the century, Elena Whitaker is about to meet the charming stranger whose smile makes her forget every rule she's ever lived by. His name is Donovan, and when the ship starts to sink, when the lights die, when the ocean itself is trying to drag them both under, she'll have to decide: hold on to 10 years of hate, or hold on to the man she's falling for, knowing that letting go of either one might kill her. This is a heart-wrenching, slow burn, enemies to lovers romance, where the storm outside is nothing compared to the one raging inside them. One cruise, one forbidden love, one night that will change two families forever. Stay until the end, because the final chapter will leave you crying, cheering, and hitting replay. Trapped on a luxury cruise with the man she must not love starts right now. Chapter 1: Embarkation and Sparks. The Aether Odyssey gleamed like a floating palace against the Miami sunset, her white hull catching the last rays of molten gold and throwing them back in 1,000 dazzling shards. From the dock, Elena Whitaker watched the ship breathe, lights flickering on deck by deck, string quartets tuning beneath the open sky, champagne flutes chiming like distant bells. Everything about the vessel screamed escape, and God, she needed one. She tugged the strap of her canvas tote higher on her shoulder and tried to ignore the ache behind her ribs. 2 weeks. 2 weeks without her mother's trembling voice asking if she was sure she should be traveling alone. 2 weeks without the framed photograph of her father on the mantel, his smile frozen forever at 39. 2 weeks to remember she was more than the girl whose family had been broken by a single signature on a contract 10 years ago. Earth to Elena! Mia Chan appeared at her elbow, sunglasses perched in her jet black hair, wheeling a neon pink suitcase that looked ready for Coachella instead of the Caribbean. Stop brooding, babe. This is a luxury cruise, not a wake. I paid extra for the drink package and I intend to bankrupt them. Elena laughed despite herself. I'm not brooding, I'm absorbing. You're absorbing like a Victorian widow absorbs laudanum. Come on. Mia hooked their arms together and dragged her up the gangway. The moment they stepped aboard, the air changed, cooler, scented with hibiscus and money. Crew in crisp, white uniforms greeted them with smiles bright enough to power the ship. A photographer in a sailor cap tried to corral them for the obligatory embarkation photo. Smile like you're not plotting revenge on men who were loafers without socks, Mia whispered. Elena snorted just as the flash went off. Perfect! That one was going straight to her mother's fridge. Their cabin was on deck 9, a balcony stateroom with a bottle of Prosecco sweating gently in an ice bucket. Mia squealed, popped the cork, and immediately began live streaming to her followers. Elena slipped out onto the balcony instead, letting the wind tug at her auburn hair. The harbor slid away beneath them, the city shrinking until it was nothing but a glittering promise she was happy to leave behind. By the time the sun drowned itself in the Atlantic, the ship was alive. The welcome aboard mixers spilled across the sky lounge, crystals, chandeliers, a live jazz band, passengers dressed like they were auditioning for a Bond film. Elena wore a simple emerald slip dress that made her eyes look almost unreal under the lights. She told herself she dressed for herself. The lie tasted sweet. Mia had already commandeered a corner table and was holding court with 2 investment bankers and a retired Broadway diva. Elena accepted a flute of something pink and expensive and drifted toward the railing, content to watch the wake churn silver beneath the stars. That was when the elbow happened. She felt it before she heard the apology, a firm nudge against her upper arm that sent half her cocktail arcing through the air in the graceful pink comet. The rest splashed down the front of a charcoal linen shirt stretched across a very male chest. "Oh my God, I am so," Elena started. "Occupational hazard. I've been doused by worse than rosé. Airport coffee mostly." She looked up, way up, and forgot the rest of her sentence. He was tall, sun-kissed, with dark hair that looked like it had recently lost a fight with the wind and decided it liked the result. A camera hung around his neck, professional grade, the kind that cost more than her rent. But it was the eyes that stopped her, ridiculous tropical ocean blue, currently laughing at her. "I'm the klutz who assaulted you with champagne," she managed. "Luke," he offered a hand, ignoring the growing stain on his shirt. "And technically, it's my fault. I was trying to get a shot of the moonrise over the railing and didn't account for beautiful women holding lethal beverages." Heat flooded her cheeks. Smooth. Dangerously smooth. "Elena," she said, shaking his hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, and it's not lethal. Yet. He grinned, and something electric sparked along her skin. Behind them, the band slid into a slow, smoky jazz number. Couples drifted toward the tiny dance floor beneath strings of fairy lights. Luke tilted his head. "Buy me a replacement drink and I'll forgive the attempted murder." "I feel a dance is the more appropriate penance," she heard herself say. Wait, was she flirting? She didn't flirt, she graphic designed. She brooded professionally. But Luke was already setting his camera carefully on a table and offering his hand again. "I accept your terms." His palms settled at the small of her back as they moved into the sway of bodies and music. He smelt like salt water and cedar, dangerous, like summer storms. They didn't speak for the first minute, just moved, finding the rhythm. She discovered he was an excellent lead, guiding her effortlessly even when she pretended to resist. "You're good at this," she said against his shoulder. "Occupational hazard. Spent 3 months in Havana teaching tourists salsa for beer money. Turns out I'm a quick study when alcohol is involved." She laughed and the sound surprised her. Light, unguarded. When had she laughed like that before? Over his shoulder, she caught Mia's wide-eyed stare and frantic thumbs up. Elena rolled her eyes, but the smile stayed. The song ended too soon. The band segued into something faster and the spell cracked just enough for reality to seep in. Luke kept her hand a second longer than necessary. "So, Elena, who spills drinks like a pro, what brings you to the floating city of excess?" "Creative retreat. My boss thinks if I stare at enough turquoise water, I'll magically design the next viral campaign." "And you, the camera suggests you're not just here for the buffet." "Guilty. Adventure photographer. Just finished 6 weeks in Patagonia getting frostbite and great shots of glaciers calving. Needed sun. And apparently rosé showers." She should have stepped back then. Should have thanked him for the dance and returned to Mia's table and the safety of small talk about stock portfolios. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Show me." He raised an eyebrow. "The photos from Patagonia." Luke's grin turned softer, almost shy. "They're not on my phone, real camera, but if you're free tomorrow at sunset, I'm doing a little impromptu gallery on the aft deck, very exclusive. Invite only." "And am I invited?" "After you baptized me in champagne, it's the least I can do." A new song began, but neither of them moved to dance again. Around them, the lounge lights dimmed to a sultry gold, and the ocean beyond the windows stretched black and endless. Elena felt the warning flutter in her chest, the one that sounded suspiciously like her mother's voice whispering, "Be careful, men like that break things." She ignored it. "I'll be there." Luke lifted her hand, brushed his lips against her knuckles in a gesture so old-fashioned that it should have been ridiculous, and somehow wasn't. Until sunset, Elena. He melted back into the crowd before she could think of a clever reply. Mia immediately materialized, gripping Elena's arm hard enough to leave marks. Tell me you got his name, cabin number, blood type, and astrological chart. Luke, that's all I have. Mia fanned herself dramatically, while Luke just looked at you like you were the first sunrise after 40 days of rain. This cruise just got interesting. Elena glanced toward the spot where he had disappeared. The champagne stain on his shirt had looked, in the low light, almost like a heart. High above them, the ship's horn sounded, deep, resonant, final. The Aether Odyssey was underway, slicing through the dark toward open water and whatever waited beyond the horizon. Elena touched her knuckles where his lips had been and felt the first crack in the wall she'd built around her heart 10 years ago. She smiled into the night, reckless and terrified and alive. Little did she know, the man whose touch lingered on her skin carried the one name she'd sworn never to forgive.
Chapter 2. Whispers on the Waves. The next morning, the Aether Odyssey drifted through water so clear it looked like liquid glass. Sunlight poured over the infinity pool on deck 12, turning every droplet into a diamond. Elena floated on her back, eyes closed, letting the salt and the silence hold her up. For the first time in years, her mind was quiet. Until Mia cannonballed beside her with a shriek that could curdle milk. Heck, Mia! Language, Whitaker. We're in international waters. The FCC can't touch us. Mia surfaced, hair plastered to her face like a glamorous sea monster. Also, guess who just walked past in board shorts that should be illegal? Elena didn't have to guess. She felt him before she saw him, like the air pressure changed. Luke stood at the pool bar laughing at something the bartender said, one hip against the counter, water bottle dangling from 2 fingers. The sun loved him. It slid over the ridges of muscle earned from hauling camera gear up mountains and turned his skin the color of warm teak. He spotted her. That slow smile unfolded, the one that made her stomach drop like she'd missed the step on stairs that weren't there. "Morning, Trouble," he called, crossing the deck barefoot. "You look unfairly good for someone who tried to assassinate me last night." "I prefer the term christened," she shot back, treading water. "You're welcome." Luke crouched at the pool's edge, forearms braced on his knees. Up close, his eyes were even more ridiculous, blue ringed with storm gray. "I come bearing invitations. My friend Jake is hosting a volleyball tournament at 2. Losers buy winner's dinner. Interested in being on my team?" "I'm a tragically uncoordinated," she warned. "Perfect. I like a challenge." Mia, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly developed a coughing fit that sounded suspiciously like liar. Elena splashed her. "Fine, but if I take out an elderly passenger with a rogue serve, it's on you." Luke's grin widened. "Deal." He left with a lazy salute, and Mia immediately rounded on her. "You're glowing, like radioactive. I need sunglasses." "Shut up. Make me." The volleyball game was chaos wrapped in sunshine. Jake turned out to be a 6'4" human golden retriever with floppy blonde hair and the tendency to shout "my bad" every time he accidentally spiked the ball into someone's margarita. He and Jake made a terrifying team. Luke's serves were vicious. Jake's blocks were enthusiastic walls of flailing limbs. Elena and Mia were paired against them with a honeymooning couple from Toronto who kept stopping to kiss. Every time Elena jumped for the ball, she felt Luke's eyes on her. Not predatory, just drinking her in. When she actually managed to score, He let out a whoop and lifted her off the ground in a spinning hug before seeming to remember they were supposed to be enemies. "Good serve, Whitaker," Jake yelled, then immediately got hit in the face with the ball. Mia cackled so hard she fell over. They lost spectacularly. Dinner was on them. That night, the ship's comedy club was packed. The comedian, a wiry New Yorker, roasted everyone from vegans to cryptocurrency bros. Elena sat between Mia and Luke, shoulders brushing every time they laughed, which was often. At one point, the comic asked for newlyweds. Jake, drunk on pina coladas and poor decisions, dragged Mia on stage and proposed on one knee with a cocktail onion ring. The crowd lost it. Mia pretended to accept, then pushed him into the wings. Elena was wiping tears of laughter when Luke leaned close, breath warm against her ear. "Walk with me after this?" She should say no. She should remember the rules she'd lived by since she was 18. Have fun, never get attached, never ever trust a man who looks like he stepped out of a cologne ad. Instead, she whispered, "Okay." They ended up on the promenade deck, the one that wrapped all the way around the ship. The air was velvet, scented with night-blooming jasmine from the onboard gardens. Overhead, the sky was a riot of stars, more than she'd ever seen in the city. Luke leans against the railing, hands in his pockets. "So, graphic designer, tell me what you actually love about it." She blinked. Most guys asked what she did for work and tuned out at the phrase vector graphics. Luke looked genuinely curious. "I love translating feeling into shape. Like someone hands me a product, say a perfume, and I have to make you smell it just by looking. It's like visual poetry." He nodded, eyes on the black water. "I get that. A photo has to make you feel the cold, even when you're sitting in your kitchen." They talked for hours. He learned he'd once spent a night in an Icelandic ice cave just to catch the northern lights at the perfect angle. She learned she could quote every line from Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 version, obviously. When she admitted she sometimes designed in the dark because harsh light killed her inspiration, he laughed softly and said, "Same. I edit raw files at 3 a.m. with nothing but the glow of the screen. My neighbors think I'm a serial killer." At some point, their shoulders touched and stayed that way. Neither moved apart. Below them, the ship's wake glowed electric blue, bioluminescence churned up by the propellers. Elena watched it swirl and vanish. "I used to think the ocean swallowed everything. Grief, mistakes, people, like it could just erase them." Luke was silent a moment. "And now?" "Now, I think it just carries them somewhere else, changes them, brings them back when you least expect it." He turned to look at her. The deck lights caught the sharp line of his jaw, the softness in his eyes. "Elena?" A voice crackled over the ship's intercom, smooth and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor delay with one of our stabilizers. Nothing to be concerned about, but we'll be reducing speed tonight. Enjoy the calm seas." The spell cracked. Elena stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they'd been standing. "I should—" "Yeah, of course." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost boyish. "Sunset tomorrow. Aft deck. Don't forget." "I won't." She fled before she could do something stupid, like kiss him under a sky full of indifferent stars. Back in the cabin, Mia was sprawled across her bed eating chocolate-covered strawberries and scrolling through photos from the comedy show. "You're doomed," she sang when Elena walked in. Capital D, doomed. "I'm not doomed." "Girl, you have hard eyes so bad I'm getting secondhand diabetes." She threw a pillow at her and went to stand on their balcony. Far behind the ship, heat lightning flickered on the horizon. silent, distant, beautiful. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to think about how perfectly her head would fit beneath Luke's chin. Across the ship, in a suite twice the size of hers, Luke stood at his own balcony railing. He lifted his camera, zoomed in on the lightning, then lowered it without taking the shot. He already had the only image he wanted burned behind his eyes. Elena, laughing in the golden hour, hair whipping across her face, green eyes bright enough to rival the sea. He didn't know yet that her last name was Whitaker. He didn't know that 10 years ago, his father had signed a contract that put a gun in a desperate man's hand. He only knew that for the first time in years, he wanted to stay in one place long enough to watch a sunrise with someone. Far away, the storm on the horizon pulsed once more, patient and hungry.
Chapter 3: Storm's Shadow. The first warning came at breakfast. Elena was halfway through a perfect croissant when the sky, which had been a careless, endless blue for 3 days, turned the color of tarnished pewter. The change was so sudden that conversation on the Lido deck faltered mid-sentence. Phones rose like periscopes. Someone muttered, "That's not normal." Captain Liam's voice followed minutes later, calm and clipped over the loudspeakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, a fast-moving low-pressure system has developed west of our position. As a precaution, we are altering course and increasing speed to remain ahead of it. Outdoor decks will be closed temporarily. All activities will continue indoors. There is no cause for alarm." Elena rolled her eyes. Translation: everything is fine until it very much isn't. I'm getting another mimosa. Elena's stomach dipped, and not from the gentle roll of the ship. She scanned the dining area and found Luke at a corner table with Jake. He lifted a hand in greeting. She lifted hers back, then immediately pretended she'd been reaching for the salt shaker. By noon, the ocean had teeth. The Aether Odyssey, for all her 30,000-ton grandeur, began to sway like a drunk ballerina. Plates slid, children squealed. An elderly man in a Panama hat clung to a pillar and declared this was exactly how the Titanic started. All guests were herded into the main theater for an enrichment lecture that no one wanted. The chandeliers swung like pendulums. The lecturer, a marine biologist, kept smiling through gritted teeth as his laser pointer drew red squiggles on his own forehead. Luke found her in the third row. "Seat taken?" he murmured. She shook her head. He slid in beside her, thigh brushing hers. The contact was brief, accidental, and it still lit her up like a struck match. "Scared of storms?" he asked softly. "Only the ones that come with baggage," she said before she could stop herself. He frowned, curious, but the lights flickered and conversation died. Captain Liam appeared on stage in full dress whites, face carved from granite. Behind him, a radar image glowed sickly green. "We've sustained damage to our starboard stabilizer. Repairs are underway, but the storm has intensified faster than forecast. We are now committed to riding it out at sea. For safety, all guests must remain in their cabins until further notice. Crew will deliver meals. Please stay calm." A collective inhale. Then the questions exploded. Elena felt the old panic crawl up her throat, the same one that used to wake her at 14, convinced she'd heard a gunshot in the night. She stood so fast, her chair screeched. Luke caught her wrist. "Hey, breathe. I need air. Decks are closed. I need—" She couldn't finish. The walls were pressing in, the chandeliers swinging like nooses. He didn't ask permission, just took her hand and pulled her through the side exit, past a flustered crew member who started to protest and then thought better of it when he saw Luke's face. They ended up in the ship's library, 2 decks down, smaller, quieter, lit by emergency strips that bathed the leather-bound books in bruised violet. The ship groaned around them, a living thing in pain. Elena sank into an armchair and pressed her palms to her eyes. Luke crouched in front of her. "Talk to me." "It's stupid." "Try me." She laughed, a cracked sound.
My dad died during a storm, not on a boat, at home. He locked himself in his office while thunder shook the windows, and she swallowed. I hate feeling trapped when the sky is angry. Luke's face changed, something raw and careful settling there. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the same gentleness he might use on a skittish animal. You're not trapped. You're here, with me, and I'm not going anywhere. The ship lurched hard. Books rained from the upper shelves. Luke caught her before she slid from the chair, pulling her down to the carpet with him. They knelt among scattered volumes of Hemingway and Cruise brochures, breathing hard. Outside the porthole, the world had turned apocalyptic. Black waves the size of buildings, white foam shredded into ghosts. Inside, the emergency lights painted them in shades of blood and bruise. Elena's pulse hammered in her ears. "I don't even know your last name," she whispered. "Donovan," he said, almost apologetic. "Luke Donovan." The name hit her like a slap. Donovan. She jerked back as if she burned her. No. Confusion flickered across his face. "Elena Whitaker," she spat. "Elena Whitaker, Richard Whitaker's daughter." Recognition dawned horribly. His tan drained to ash. "Elena, I didn't. My father, your father destroyed mine." Her voice cracked like ice. "He took everything, the company, the house, the hope. My dad put a gun in his mouth because of what Marcus Donovan did. And now I'm stuck on a ship in the middle of nowhere with his son." Luke looked like she punched him in the throat. "I didn't know your name. I swear to you." "Stop." She scrambled to her feet, slipping on scattered pages. "Just stay away from me." She bolted. The corridors were dim, tilting mazes. Red emergency lights strobed. She passed crying children, a woman retching into a potted plant, a crew member shouting in Tagalog. She didn't stop until she reached her cabin and slammed the door. Mia was curled on her bed, green-faced, clutching a barf bag like a teddy bear. "Oh, thank God. I thought you'd been eaten by a kraken." Elena collapsed beside her, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Mia took one look at her face. "What happened?" "Donovan," Elena managed. "He's a Donovan." Mia went very still. "You're sure?" "Donovan Luke, the photographer, the one I—" Her voice broke on the almost kiss she could still taste in the air between them. Mia swore softly, creatively, in 3 languages. The ship screamed as another wave hit broadside. The lights died completely. In the sudden dark, Elena heard her own heartbeat and the howl of wind that sounded exactly like her dad's last storm. Somewhere down the corridor, Luke stood outside her door, fist raised to knock, then lowered. He rested his forehead against the cool metal and whispered her name like a prayer he no longer deserved. Above them, the storm tightened its fist.
Chapter 4. Hearts in the Tempest. The lights came back in pulses, dim, sickly amber, then died again. The Aether Odyssey no longer rolled. She staggered. Every impact of wave against hull sounded like the fist of an angry god. Elena sat on the floor of the cabin, knees to chest, arms wrapped tight around them. Mia had finally passed out, one hand still clutching the barf bag like a talisman. The ship's emergency klaxon gave a low, continuous moan that crawled under the skin. A new announcement crackled through the wall speakers, half drowned by static. "This is Captain Liam. We have lost propulsion in the engine room. Flooding is contained. Repeat, contained. All guests remain in cabins. Do not attempt—" The speakers cut to a shriek of feedback, then nothing. Elena's pulse spiked so hard she tasted metal. Another impact. The entire cabin tilted 30 degrees. The balcony door burst open, rain lashed in sideways.
soaking the carpet in seconds. The glass table slid, shattered against the wall. Elena lunged, slammed the door shut, and latched it with shaking fingers. She was alone now, truly alone, in the dark with a storm that wanted blood. A fist hammered on the cabin door. "Elena!" Luke. Of course it was Luke. She pressed her back to the door and said nothing. "Elena, please. The crew's evacuating lower decks. There's flooding on 4 and 5. We have to move higher. Go away. I'm not leaving you." She laughed, a ragged sound. That's rich coming from a Donovan. Heavy silence broken only by the howl of wind. Then, quieter. "I know what my father did. I was 20 when it happened, old enough to understand, young enough to be powerless. I hated him for years. Elena, I still do on the days the guilt gets loud, but I am not him." Another wave hit. The ship groaned like it might split in half. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of her father's study, the storm that night 10 years ago, thunder so violent it rattled the windows in their frames. She thought of the single gunshot muffled by rain. She thought of Luke's hand steadying her in the library, the way he looked at her like she was something worth staying for. She opened the door. He was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, white t-shirt clinging to every line of his chest, a bleeding cut above one eyebrow. Behind him, the corridor lights strobed red, painting him in hellish flashes. For a moment, they only stared. Then the ship lurched again, harder. The floor buckled. Elena stumbled forward straight into his arms. Luke caught her, held her so tightly she could feel his heart hammering against her own. "I'm sorry," he said into her wet hair. "I'm so, so sorry." She was crying and didn't know when it had started. "I hate that I want to forgive you." "I know." Emergency lights flickered. Somewhere below, metal screamed. "We have to go," he said. "Now." He took her hands and pulled her into the corridor. It was a nightmare in motion. Passengers huddled in clusters, some praying in whispers, others filming on phones with shaking hands. A crew member lay unconscious against a wall, blood trickling from his temple. The air smelled of ozone and fear. They ran. Up stairwells that tilted like funhouse mirrors, past a window that exploded inward in a spray of glass and salt water. Luke shielded her with his body, took the shards across his back without flinching. Deck 10 was chaos. Abandoned dinner service carts overturned, chairs skittering like animals. The grand atrium's massive chandeliers swung in wild arcs, crystals singing as they shattered against marble. Jake appeared out of the dark, wild-eyed, dragging a sobbing elderly woman by the hand. "Luke, they're opening the lifeboats on deck 15, but the starboard side's compromised." An explosion of sound cut him off. Not thunder, something deeper, mechanical. The ship listed violently to port. People screamed as gravity reversed. Bodies slid across the floor toward the starboard windows that now looked straight down into black water. Luke grabbed a pillar, wrapped an arm around Elena, and held on. For one endless second, the world hung sideways. Then the ship righted with a bone-shaking crash. Water poured in through shattered doors. "Move," Luke roared. They ran again. Up, always up. Jake and the elderly woman behind them. Deck 14's corridor was half flooded, ankle-deep, and rising. The emergency lights underwater glowed an eerie, apocalyptic blue. They reached the stairwell to 15 and found it blocked, a fallen beam, twisted metal. A child's shoe floated past in the current. Luke didn't hesitate. He boosted Elena up on his shoulders. "Climb!" She scrambled over the beam, reached back. He passed the elderly woman up next, then Jake, then hauled himself over with bleeding hands. Deck 15 was open sky and hell. The storm had teeth now. Rain like bullets, wind that wanted to rip skin from bone. Lifeboats swung on davits, half launched, half still loading. Crews shot it over the gale. Luke pushed Elena toward the nearest boat. "Go!" She turned back. "Not without you." "I have to find—" "Now, Luke!" Lightning forked, illuminating his face, raw with terror and something fiercer. He kissed her.
Not soft, not gentle, a desperate bruising claim, lips cold from rain, tasting of salt and copper and every apology he couldn't voice. She kissed him back like it might be the last thing she ever did. The ship lurched again. A lifeboat tore free on the starboard side, swung wildly, then plummeted into the sea with a scream of metal and human voices. Luke tore his mouth from hers. "I love you," he shouted over the wind. She was crying too hard to answer. Crew hands grabbed them, hauled them toward the last portside boat. They were the last to aboard. As the davits lowered, the Aether Odyssey gave one final mortal shudder. Somewhere deep in her belly, something catastrophic gave way. The lights aboard died forever. The lifeboat hit the water and spun away into the dark. Behind them, the great ship listed, her bow dipping like a weary dancer taking a final bow. Elena clutched Luke's hand so hard she felt bones grind. He held on just as tightly. Above them, the storm raged on, indifferent and ancient. But inside the small orange shell of the lifeboat, two hearts, once sworn enemies, beat in frantic, perfect unison.
Chapter 5. Dawn's Promise. The storm broke the way violent things do, suddenly, completely, as if it had never been. One moment, the lifeboat was spinning in black chaos, waves towering like collapsing buildings. The next, the wind dropped to a whisper, and the rain thinned to a soft silver mist. The sea flattened as though a giant hand had smoothed it. The sky, bruised purple for hours, cracked open along the eastern edge and bled gold. Elena lifted her head from Luke's shoulder. Salt crusted her lashes, her fingers were numb where they were still locked with his. Around them, the other survivors began to stir, some weeping quietly, some laughing in disbelief, one old man crossing himself over and over. Far in the distance, searchlights swept the water. Coast Guard cutters, a helicopter thumping low overhead. Someone started singing Amazing Grace in a cracked tenor. Others joined until the little boat carried a fragile choir into the newborn day. Luke's voice, rough from shouting and salt, found her ear. "Look." The Aether Odyssey, Flory on her side 2 miles away, half submerged, running lights dark, yet somehow still dignified, like a grand dame refusing to believe the ball was over. Rescue ships swarmed her flanks, lifeboats dotted the water like orange petals. Elena's throat closed. "We made it." "We made it," he echoed, and the wonder in his voice broke something open inside her. They were winched aboard a cutter just after sunrise. Blankets, hot coffee, medics. Someone wrapped Elena in silver foil like a baked potato and tried to separate her from Luke so they could treat the glass shards in his back. She refused to let go of his hand until a kindly paramedic promised they would stay in the same bay. Hours later, after statements, after tears, after Mia tackling her with a sobbing bear hug and Jake punching Luke so hard in the shoulder it was basically a love letter, they found themselves on the cutter's aft deck, wrapped in the same scratchy navy blanket. The sea was glass now, reflecting a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Dolphins arced alongside the ship, racing the bow wave. Elena rested her head against Luke's good shoulder. "I keep waiting to wake up. If this is a dream, I'm never opening my eyes again." She laughed, wet, shaky, real. "We have to talk about it, Luke. The families, the past, all of it." "I know." He turned so they faced each other, blankets slipping from their shoulders. The cut above his eyebrow had been butterfly stitched. He looked like a pirate who'd lost the fight with the window and won the war anyway. "I called my mother from the satellite phone, told her everything, told her I'm done pretending the Donovan name erases what happened. I'm selling the house in Aspen, the one Dad bought with money he never should have had. The proceeds go to your mom, to any family he hurt. It's not enough, it'll never be enough, but it's a start." Elena stared at him, tears spilling over before she could stop them. "You'd do that?" "I should have done it years ago."
His thumb brushed the tears from her cheek. I was ashamed. I thought if I just kept moving, Patagonia, Iceland, anywhere far, I could outrun it. Then I met you, and I realized running was just another way of letting him win. She swallowed hard. I called my mom too, told her I'm in love with Marcus Donovan's son. A watery laugh. She hung up on me, twice. Third time, she just gratted. But she listened. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for days. I don't want to be the thing that breaks your family, he said quietly. You're not. You're the thing that might finally heal it. The helicopter thudded overhead again, lowering a basket to another lifeboat. Cheers rose from the deck as more survivors were lifted aboard. Luke pulled her closer. So what now, Elena Whitaker? She looked out at the endless, forgiving sea. Now we go home. We sit at the same table, your mother, my mother, us, and we don't leave until the coffee's cold and every ugly truth has been said out loud. And then she turned, rose on her toes, and kissed him soft and slow and certain. Then we start writing the part that comes after the storm. I like that chapter. Mia's voice rang out behind them. Oh my God, get a cabin, you two. Some of us are still traumatized. Jake appeared beside her, arms slung around her shoulders, both of them grinning like idiots. Actually, Jake announced, I've decided to marry Mia for her cruise insurance. Purely practical. Mia elbowed him. In your dreams, Harlan. Every night, Chen, every night. Elena laughed until her ribs hurt. Luke's arms tightened around her, and she felt the last knot of old grief finally loosen. Later, when the cutter docked in San Juan beneath the sky washed clean, the four of them stood on the pier watching passengers reunite with families. Sobs, shouts, flowers, news cameras. Luke lifted Elena's hand and kissed her knuckles exactly where he had that first night under the string lights. Sunset Gallery still on? She asked, teasing. Every night for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me. She pretended to think about it. Only if you promise no more Rose assassinations. Deal. He pulled a small, battered memory card from his pocket, miraculously dry. Also, I salvaged the card from my camera. There's one shot on here I want to be the first you see when we get home. What is it? He smiled, soft and devastating. You, laughing on the aft deck the night we met, before I knew your name, before everything. I looked at it 100 times on that lifeboat, kept me breathing. Elena felt her heart crack open and flood with light. She rose on her toes again and kissed him in front of half of Puerto Rico and every news drone in the Caribbean. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, gilding the water, the pier, the whole impossible, beautiful world they had almost lost. And somewhere out on the horizon, the sea, ancient, merciless, and endlessly kind, carried the broken pieces of the Aether Odyssey away, making room for whatever came next. For Elena and Luke, whatever came next looked a lot like forever.